serious, what is the creepiest or most unexplained thing that's happened to you that you still think about to this day? I had a recurring nightmare of a pitch-black parasite sucking the life out of me. Sometimes it waited for me in dark corners to go to bed. My cats always slept on my bed during that time. For me it was a very stressful time. I got an itch at the place of my chest where I dreamed the parasite was sucking my life out of me. I got sick and felt a pea-sized lump. I went to my doc and they ordered a biopsy of that lump. As it turned out, I had male breast cancer at the age of 28. After I got well again, the dream never came back and my cats slept in their places again and not on my bed. The dream was creepy enough. What it made for me were my cats protecting me. I've shared this before, but I still think it's an interesting story. I was exploring the area behind my house shortly after we moved in. The area back there had once been a small quarry that had since filled with water. It was a pit of pond that supposedly went straight down 60 feet if you stepped into it. I was walking along the edge and I came across a backpack filled with old video game cartridges and a set of clothing just laying on the ground. They were for the N64 and we found this around 2004, so they were outdated. Next to it was a set of clothing. The clothes were laying on the ground, spread out, pants and shirt, so it looked like someone laying down. They looked like they'd been there a long time. Same with the backpack. I told my parents and they called the cops. There had been no reports of missing children or anything in the area. We never got an explanation, but it was weird. I had a schnauzer that could hear a cat stalk across a Persian rug. The slightest noise could wake her from a slumber and set off her constant barking. She made a great tent companion while on backpacking trips. Bears, raccoons and skunks would all get fair warning if they came within range of our campsite. One morning we woke up from a night without interruptions in the backcountry of SW Colorado, and I found my tent's central guy line was no longer staked down by the aluminium stake that I had used, but instead by a piece of aspen branch that had been carved into what looked like a tiki statue. Nothing too ornate, but a snarling face with teeth had been carved from the bark, and it had obviously been heated in a fire to give it a brown color. My dog didn't make a sound and I apparently slept harder than I thought. I scrambled out of the tent and looked around the small alpine lake and saw no other campers nor any sign that people had been around. Cut my trip short and hauled ass the 8 miles back to my car. Not a single other car in the lot at the trailhead. Not creepy as such, more just unexplained. As a kid I was round a friend's house after school. It was a sunny day, so we went to the park near his house, then through the woods there. His younger brother was with us as well. In the woods, beside the path, there were red berries on the floor. The berries had been arranged into 3 stick figures, which was weird as there were 3 of us. We got back to the house, and my friend and I decided to go back to take another look. His brother stayed at the house. When we got back there were only 2 stick figures. My friend snapped a photo on his phone, then kicked the berries, and we ran back to the house. I have no idea what was going on. Was it just some kind of prank being pulled on us? We had a rescue dog years back, terrier mix. We lived in the countryside on a wooded hillside and owned about 5 acres of woodland and rough fields, mostly wild. This dog loved to be up there chasing rabbits but loved her home too, so would never be gone for very long. One day she went missing. We took our other dogs up there and searched thoroughly, but nothing. We had another friend bring his dogs, nothing. We advertised, put up posters, we did little but search high and low for 6 days, but nothing. On the 6th day we had pretty much given up hope, but I decided to go up one last time because I had a hunch, a tickle in my belly, about one particular area which had already been thoroughly searched. I took a sickle and a pair of gardening gloves and hacked my way towards the center of a huge bramble patch. It was summer and all I could hear was birdsong and insects, but suddenly I heard a muffled yip. I called her name and then heard her again getting excited. She was deep underground in a rabbit warren. I stayed calling to her until help arrived. The local fire brigade were kind enough to come and help and advise, and we got her out eventually. She ran around like a demented muddy pup, and amazingly the vet said she was basically okay, had probably been getting enough moisture from eating mud to keep her alive. I am not generally a fanciful person, but I just knew in my know she was there. No explanation for it. Right after quarantine started, I got a package in the mail. It was addressed to my name and my address and contained one pink starburst and nothing else. To this day, I have no idea who sent it or why. The return address was a vacant office space across the country. I had a short lucid dream. And the scene happened a few days later. I am 200% sure about that because I keep a diary of my dreams, and it matched perfectly. I was driving home from work on a long, somewhat dark road. I'll admit I was tired and cold and just wanted to get home. Speed limit was 60 miles per hour and I was doing closer to 70. Suddenly, a girl with long blonde hair, a black coat with brown fur on the hood and jeans just showed up in front of my car. I knew there was another car to my left up ahead, but it was black and all I saw was that it was stopped before I saw her. I managed to maneuver around her. I was freaked out. I turned to a side street and stopped to figure out what was happening. Then a tall guy with a black coat and short hair gets out of the driver's side of the stopped car, grabbed her, dragged her to the car while she was fighting him, and put her back in the car. I called the police and gave them the description of the car and the direction it took off in. I never heard anything about it, and I have not stopped thinking about her since. It's been 2 years. Edit, just in case anyone is curious or could even know something. The location was Lincoln, Rhode Island, US, next to the high school. Jan/February 2019. The car was a new black sports, maybe, car with the tail light going all the way across the back of the car. George Washington Highway. Was camping alone in a small one-person tent. All snug and secure in the tent, I went to sleep. Was woken by a clap of thunder at 3 a.m. to discover both the inner and outer tent door was wide open. That was freaky. Once I was hired to load firewood into my aunt's basement. She lives alone and left the basement door open for me while she went out. I usually swing the interior basement door as wide as I can when I walk in, and the door almost never closes completely, but once I heard it close, and when I was about to grab another load I saw that the deadbolt locked. When I walk in, my arms are filled with firewood so I wouldn't be able to lock it myself. Looked out the window and checked the garage to see if she came home, but she wasn't there. The door itself was enclosed so no one to shut it. I tried various ways of slamming the door so it would lock by itself, but nothing worked. It's an isolated house, so I would have heard someone drive up, and it's highly unlikely someone walked over just to lock the door and leave and time it while I was piling up firewood, and there's wooden steps so I would have heard someone walking down them. It's the only time I've seen a deadbolt lock itself in my life. Maybe around age 14, early 90s. We were traveling from TX up to Tacoma, Washington. We were about out of money, almost out of gas, no food, stuck in Chico, California. I sat in the car while Mom took my younger sisters to the restroom at a gas station. I was riddled with anxiety about our situation and looking down. The car door opened and I looked up. A lady that looked like a brown-haired Brady mom sat in the seat and faced me. She said, "It seems like you're down on your luck. Take this and give it to your mom. Tell her to pay it forward someday to someone who needs it." I looked down into my hand and there was a $100 bill. I looked up and she had disappeared. Nowhere in the parking lot, just vanished. I cried. When Mom came back I told her what happened and she cried. We got gas. There was a guy selling oranges on the side of the road and we bought a bag and went to a local park that had a part of the river with a little spillway dam and went swimming and ate oranges for a couple of hours before getting back on the road. I never saw the lady again, but she saved us and we did make it up to Tacoma to start our new life. Thank you, stranger lady with invisible powers, we never forgot your kindness. One of my cats had been missing for a few weeks. I had given her up as gone. While on the phone with a friend 100 miles away, who has never seen my house, he interrupts himself from talking about work and says with a strange urgency, "Doug. Open your front door. Your cat is sitting on the porch waiting to come in. And of course upon opening the door, I find her just casually sitting there. We were both beyond blown away. Between sobs of joy I asked, "How did you know?" And he said, "I don't know, man." That was really weird. My grandma and I both saw a dead person in our laundry room once. So, the laundry connected to the kitchen by a doorway. The doorway connected to the living room, too. One afternoon, Grandma needed a hamper, so I followed her to the laundry. We saw the dead person as soon as we stepped foot in that doorway. It looked to be about my height, I was 6 or 7ish, and totally black. Not as in a black person but a literal black coating on its skin. It was slumped near the washing machine. We only saw it for a split second, enough time to register that it was there, and then it was gone. I remember my grandma saying, "Did you see that?" and laughing it off. She got the hamper and did her thing, and I just avoided the kitchen for a while. And on a semi-related note, I used to have the freakiest nightmares in that house. I had nightmares so graphic, so often, that my pediatrician wanted me to see a therapist. Ninja edit, I'm not a wholehearted believer in ghosts, but I do still wonder what it was. My grandma always describes it as the garbage bag because it was about that big, and slouched in the corner like trash. I woke up in the bath at a very specific time, like 5:45. Twice. 10 years in between. Water was getting cold, I was naked. No memory of getting there, some fragments of like seeing my own hand turning on the tap. No drugs or alcohol or even medication involved. The worst thing was the fear. When I woke up I felt an inexplicable, almost primordial, dread. Lasted for hours, I was shaking, couldn't function. Still freaks me out thinking about it. Might have been 3 times, I can't remember properly, I still get the shakes from the memory. Edit to add, oh gosh you guys, thank you so much for the awards. My first. I was deployed to Iraq and we stayed in a former prison in Baghdad. During the night we would see and hear strange things. The base at this time only had soldiers, but we would hear children playing from inside the prison. One day we decided to dig deeper to see where the kids were. When we finally found where the noise was coming from, we found a room with the ceiling caved in. We didn't find any kids but found kids' books, toys and kids' clothes. Everything looked like it wasn't moved in weeks. We continued to hear the kids in the year we spent there. A friend and I from high school used to go out to this old county road and smoke a joint on a big hill facing a large, old brick house across the street that sat in a large field. The face of the house had 2 rows of 6 windows each, facing the road. One night we were chilling on said hill and looking out at the house as the sun was going down, and all of a sudden a light turned on in one of the windows and then shut off. Then another random window lit up, then shut off. It kept going. Faster, faster. A window would light up and shut off and then go to another. It did it for about a minute and eventually was doing it so quickly it couldn't have possibly been a person going room to room or even a person with access to multiple switches at one time. After about a minute after speeding up to random flashes it stopped. It simply didn't make sense. We both saw it. We talked about it many times afterward. The only thing we can figure is if the homeowner had some kind of automated lighting system hooked up to all the rooms and was messing with us. Other than that, I have no idea. Sketchy AF though. My nana, great-grandma, and mum were very close but lived overseas from one another my whole life. They talked on the phone every Sunday, but because it was an international call, it was extremely expensive, so they took turns calling every Sunday at 8 AM to make the cost equal. However, due to a 4-minute difference in clocks, Nana always ended up calling at 8:04. Also, the caller ID never showed up. Mum called on a Sunday, Nana died on a Tuesday. The following week, we're sitting at the table eating breakfast, and Mum notices it's 7:50 AM. Nana would have been calling any minute. She gets emotional, I comfort her. Then at 8:04 AM the motherfucking phone rings. The called ID reads unknown caller. We look at each other like, what is this, some sort of sick joke? She answers, "There's nothing but static at the other line, and some garbled voice recording. The only decipherable words in it are, 'We hope you enjoy your trip to paradise.'" Click, phone cuts off. Absolutely no explanation for that one. Still baffles me to this day. I was walking my dog once around the pond in my grandmother's condominium gated community. It was supposed to storm that night, so it was windy all day. Like tree branches violently flailing around and small items being blown away. I got to the front of my grandmother building, there wasn't a soul in sight, and suddenly it got really quiet. Which was weird because it was literally windy all day, but the wind suddenly stopped. I sort of looked around and felt off. It was the kind of quiet you could hear. Suddenly a big gust of wind comes in and my dog starts freaking out. I tug him to come towards the building so I could put the code in to get us inside, when suddenly I hear a voice go, "Hey," right behind me. It felt like it was right next to my ear. I turned around and there still wasn't anyone there. And my dog was still freaking out. So I dragged him inside, ran up the flight of stairs to my grandma's condo and locked the door. I still have no idea what happened to this day. Edit. I should mention the gated community has a lot of buildings with geriatric folks living in it beyond my grandmother's condo. The area was used during the tuberculosis outbreak to bring patients to basically die, and they would cremate their bodies in a now abandoned building at the center of the gated community. I've also seen shadows in the window of the tower whenever I went to the park nearby. I was putting my daughter to bed, and she was talking about her godmother. We were reading a book that her godmother had gotten her. Her godmother died in 2019, of breast cancer. She was my very best friend, more like a sister, and she doted on my daughter. We are reminiscing about her, and my daughter's twinkle lights she has on her ceiling starts going off. They have multiple settings and they are on the rainbow setting. Not too weird, maybe they have a short or something. I go to turn them off. They aren't plugged in. I figure it's my friend saying hi. She loved rainbows. I'm not superstitious, but she promised to stick around and haunt us. I find it comforting. Those lights still go off every now and then. My girlfriend and I are in a long-distance relationship. We typically take turns traveling between each other's countries, Australia and Canada. About 2 years ago, it was my turn to travel over to Australia to stay with her and her mom. For a bit of background, my GF's room was built as an extension/add-on to their garage. So to get to it, you had to walk through their garage to get to her room. About a couple weeks into my trip over there, I wake up at around 1 AM and the room is just glowing red. I look up at the ceiling and I see this black figure crawling through the ceiling. It moved in such an inhuman way, almost like it was breaking every one of its bones to move. I start screaming, which wakes my GF up, and she looks up at the ceiling and starts to scream as well. Instinctively, I grab my pillow and whip it at the figure. The next thing I know, everything went black and I'm waking up a few hours later. My GF is fast asleep, so I think it was just some weird dream. At that point, I have to go to the washroom. So, I walk through the garage and try to quietly open the garage door to get into the main house. Previously, her mom had mentioned that she was getting annoyed with us staying up late at night and going through the garage door to use the washroom. Since her mom's room was down the garage door hallway, each time we would open it, the door would click loudly and wake her up. So, I'm standing there at the garage door and I try to open it as quietly as possible. As I turn the handle and the door clicks as I push it open, her mom just starts screaming at the top of her lungs. I thought it was out of rage for waking her up, so I immediately close the door and speed walk back to my GF's room. I climb into bed and gently nudge her awake to tell her that her mom is screaming. She gets up and goes to see whether her mom was still angry and try to de-escalate the situation. About 20 minutes goes by and my GF comes back into the room completely silent. She asks me if I saw the room glowing red earlier as well as a figure in the ceiling. I say yes and she goes wide-eyed and says that she thought it was just a dream too. She then says that her mom wasn't screaming at me. Apparently, when I opened the door, it did wake her up, but when she woke up, there was a black figure standing at the foot of her bed and it was slowly moving towards her. She then experienced a blackout as well and was woken up by my GF checking in on her. Yeah, the entire house slept with the lights on for a month after that. Edit, thank you for the awards kind strangers as well as the emotional support, embarrassed smiley face. Well, not the scariest thing ever, but when I was 11 my family and I moved to another town because of my dad's job. We were only going to stay there for a year, and thankfully we were given a house in a closed community of about 20 houses made for army officials and their families. So one day my parents are out and they take my baby sister. My older sister is in a friend's house and I'm left alone with our dog for like 2 hours. I was playing in my room when I remember that the black socks for my Monday uniform, kind of like a suit you wear on Mondays, are drying in the backyard. I go there with my dog and utter out loud, I wish there was something to do, and not a moment later I hear some young voice say very clearly, then let's play. I turn around to see my normally hyperactive Golden sitting looking at me like nothing has happened. I freak out immediately and ran upstairs to my parents' bedroom. I turn on the TV and hide under the covers until my family arrived. They saw me sweating, scared and paranoid at this point. They never figured out what happened but tried to make me feel better. Now the part that freaks me is that each of the houses in the community was surrounded by 3-meter tall cinder block walls. The place where my socks were was next to a wall separating from another house, one that had no children. The other house to the left was over 20 meters away and behind another wall, and the wall behind my house separated us from nothing but a steep hill. There was no one who could have said that, and to this day it freaks me out every time I think of it. When I was in 3rd grade I moved to a new town and into a new house. We lived in a camper in the backyard of the house while we renovated it. It was a pretty old house. Anyway, during renovation we found all sorts of stuff in the walls: old bottles, old pair of glasses, letters, old newspapers, old pictures of children in school clothes. It was a 2-story house and the stairs were kind of a focal point for all sorts of creepy stuff. So once you got to the top of the stairs there was a little landing before it went into 2 bedrooms. At night we would always leave the light on in the landing in case we had to get up to use the bathroom. Me and one brother shared a room and the other room was for our older brother. I refused to sleep upstairs due to how creeped out I was, so I always slept downstairs on the couch. One weekend my sister, who is older than both my brothers, came to visit and was in my oldest brother's bedroom alone, as we were all at school and my mum was at work. As she was sitting up there watching TV she heard footsteps coming up the stairs and called out as she had thought my mum was home early from work. No response other than the footsteps turning around and heading back down the stairs. When she got up the look, there was no one home and all doors locked. It doesn't stop there. My oldest brother was left home alone for a week while me and my other brother and mom and dad went on a week-long vacation. Naturally he had his girlfriend over for a couple nights to keep him company. One night she got up to pee around 3 a.m. and went downstairs to the bathroom where she said she heard children whispering. A couple nights later around 3 to 4 a.m. the GF woke my brother saying someone was in the house. They heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Since the light was on in the landing, they could see a shadow underneath the door like someone was standing there. And the doorknob began to shake. Luckily it was locked. They both started to freak out, and my brother jumped up out of bed. We had some of those dumb display samurai type swords that aren't even sharp, and he grabbed one of those and went towards the door. They heard more footsteps running down the stairs and he bravely or stupidly followed down the stairs where he was met with an empty house. All windows and doors closed and locked. He called the police but nothing came of it. I was about 10 when this took place. I'm in my early 30s now. I remember it was well into late night hours when I saw my grandmother was standing at the front screen door looking outside. She was talking to someone. I saw she was talking to my dad. I couldn't see my dad's face cause he was facing away from her. He was shirtless. He had a very large distinct mole in the middle of his back, so I knew it was him. He was mumbling something I couldn't understand. My grandmother was telling him something along the lines of, if you love them so much, why did you go and do this? My mom wasn't there with us to see this. She had left moments before after she got a call letting us know my dad had been driving drunk and hit a mule on the highway. My dad was in the hospital hanging on to life. Edit, added age and approximate time. Just a normal Saturday night, I was watching TV home alone with my 2 dogs, when I heard a banging sound coming from the basement. Legit sounded like somebody was just banging something on the appliances we had down there. Now there is no access into the basement from down there, only through the upstairs rooms that I was in, and knew nobody could have come in and got past me. So with this knowledge I was not as scared as you may think, more curious as to what the heck the noise was. One of the 2 dogs, who is a meathead and wants to fight everybody, also heard the noise and was now bolting down into the basement to investigate. I get down and see that it is my other dog, banging his head into our dryer and chest freezer, which are next to each other. My meathead dog is just stood there watching, confused. So I approach my other dog and calm him down, and we all go back upstairs. Now this freaked the heck out of me and upset me, as it seems such very strange behavior for my dog to do. Fast forward only 30 minutes or so, the banging starts again. I instantly look over to my dog, but he is lay down, but now also aware of the noise downstairs. We run down into the basement and it is Meathead now banging his head in between the appliances. Again, I now calm Meathead down and we all go back upstairs. Nothing has ever happened again since that night, 3 years now, so that ruled out brain tumors, which is what I read online about why maybe dogs bang their heads, but 2 dogs, suddenly on the same night, and it only affecting one of them at any given time, 3 years, and the 3 of us never talk about that night, lol. Lived on a 600-acre farm in Arkansas, absolutely no one around for miles and miles and miles. Was out feeding the animals after getting home late one night, just was finishing up and taking the buckets back to the barn. As I was locking up the feeding barn, we had a herding dog. Was a corgi, it just was going absolutely nuts and running into the woods, so I instantly went to investigate to make sure that the animals would be alright. Had a handheld spotlight, shining it into the woods. Saw nothing. The dog was just going absolutely nuts still, and I finally see him running between these trees towards this black splotch. Was somewhat humanoid shaped, but it went in at it and the things just seemed to absorb the light. I've never seen anything like it. Closest would be like an opaque stone, how it doesn't reflect the light, but just kind of nullifies it. Regardless, the dog suddenly was tossed up over my head. Over the electric fence, which is above 6 foot in height and at least 9 feet back towards the fence. I absolutely booked it back to the house to get the shotgun, and when I came back dogs were still barking, but the thing was gone. So I shot the shotgun in an attempt to scare whatever it was away, and it seemed to have worked. Didn't see it again. Dogs all come back to the house, feed and water them. Give them all the good boy pets for protecting the animals. Now here is the part that made it mega hard to cope with, and it really upset me. The next day, that specific dog who chased in after whatever this was wound up dead with its neck snapped completely backwards on the edge of the woods. I was so in shock and grief at the time I didn't really think about it, but I still to this day have no idea what that was, and the thought of it just makes me sick to my stomach. It was around 3 AM and I was on my computer in my mom's basement when I was 17. There was a fruit cellar door next to my desk. All of a sudden I hear 3 knocks coming from inside of the fruit cellar door. There was no other entrance to the fruit cellar. I freaked out and ran up the stairs and ran outside, thinking maybe some of my friends were playing a joke on me, but it was the middle of winter and snow was falling and there were no footprints around my house and my mother was fast asleep. I got in my car and drove to my friend's house and moved to my own place shortly thereafter. 20 years later and I still won't go in that basement at night. I was probably about 16 to 17 and had just gotten home from high school. My brother was in the kitchen making a ruckus, so I started that way. As I passed by his bedroom I saw my mom in there, sitting on his bed with the lights off, facing away from me and towards the wall. I stopped and stood in the doorway and asked if she was okay, and what she was doing. She said really slowly, "Just sitting. Come here, I need to talk to you." I took about a half step into the room when I heard my mom yelling for me in the kitchen and then saw her setting the table. I looked back to the bedroom and there was nothing there. I don't think I ever went back into that room by myself again, even 10 years later. Edit, another story from the same house, since people seem to find this one interesting. One day my mom and I were out doing yard work in the front of the house. At the time we had a trampoline that sat in front of my bedroom window, which faced the driveway/road. My 2 little brothers were bouncing on it. They were probably 7 and 9 at the time, and my mom and I had sat down in a pair of lawn chairs to take break. We were watching my little brothers play when suddenly they both stopped jumping and walked to the edge of the trampoline closest to my bedroom window and sat down, facing the window. They both started talking, but they were speaking as if they were having a conversation that we were only privy to half of. The older one, S, said something like, "Yes. Yeah, they're good. No. Okay," as if he was replying to someone asking him questions. My mom and I looked at each other like, "Are you hearing this right now?" And she asked them, "Who are you guys talking to?" Without looking away from the window, S said, "She says it's great-grandma. She says she misses you." My great-grandmother had died before my little brothers had been born. They had no idea what she looked like. My mom replied, "Great-grandma is in heaven, baby." To which he looked over at us and said, "Not anymore." They stared at the wall for a little longer and then started playing again as if nothing had ever happened. This was, again, one of many incidents that happened at that house. I left Florida in 2017, and while I've visited the family home many times since leaving, I'll never stay there at night by myself. And I try very hard not to leave the room I stay in. I once woke up in a tent in the middle of the night while camping in the Upper Peninsula with my friends. I heard this dude shouting and screaming about a bear, telling it to FCK off and stuff. Naturally I woke my buddy up and told him what was up, and he said he could hear it too. We got out of our tent and searched for almost an hour around the campsite and found nothing, then proceeded to find a Red Wings hat that was neither of ours. We took watch turns the rest of the night. And I'm pretty sure he still has the hat to this day. Note, up is a term used by people familiar with Michigan as the Upper Peninsula, the arrow-looking thing above the mitten. When I was 17 I had just gotten off my shift at Wendy's and was sitting in the parlor for my ride, and a middle-aged man approached me about a job offer. He asked me questions about my job and Wendy's, then he told me about the job he was offering. He said there were other girls and they all lived in like a dorm and the job came with benefits. It was in an office setting and other things I don't remember, but the entire time every danger bell in my body was going off full blast. It felt like my body became a vibrator. I don't remember if after the multiple rejections from me he left or if my ride had come and I zoomed out of there. The only thing I can think to this day is, did I almost get sex trafficked? Edit. I got a DM on Instagram asking for nudes. I said no. The person proceeded to tell me my entire life story, shit that no one should know about. It scared me, honestly. It was so weird. They knew all of my exes, everyone I had ever slept with, the name of the person who molested me. It was kind of chilling. They deactivated their account. No idea who it was. I once caught my neighbor staring at me outside my bedroom window while I was straightening my hair with no trousers on, and I immediately ducked under my window pane as soon as I saw him. He was legit stood in this alleyway that connects the street's back gardens, arms crossed, and there for at least 15 more minutes just staring through my window. I even got a picture of it. Pretty sure I was 15. I am a skeptic about ghosts and otherworldly beings. This event that happened causes me some consternation because it doesn't make any sense and I cannot explain what was happening. When I was in middle school, my family went camping in New Mexico. We were at a campsite near a lovely stream. My parents had one tent and my brother and I had another. As I was settling down to sleep for the night, I was listening to my headphones. I decided it was time to go to sleep, so I took my headphones off and was dozing off when I became hyper aware of a sound. It was a slight swishing/scratching sound on the side of the tent. I had just assumed there was a breeze and a stalk of grass was brushing on the side of the tent. With a sudden jolt, I realized there was no wind whatsoever. I asked my brother, Jay, "What is that?" He asked what I was referring to. I pointed out the scratching noise. He took his hand and hit the side of the tent. In response, whatever it was, hit the side of the tent from outside of the tent. We both immediately began screaming hysterically. My parents came running, and all the while the scratching continued. My parents said it was surely just a bug, a tent string or some vegetation, and got a flashlight to look at the exterior of the tent. There was nothing. They brushed down the exterior, shook the tent, took everything out of the tent and shook it. The noise continued. I was completely in pieces, so I went and slept in my parents' tent and my father slept in the kid tent. My brother and father reported that the scratching continued all night long. Still puzzled and freaked out by this experience. I was in 9th grade and my friend, Donna, invited me to accompany her and her parents to a barbecue at the Up North vacation home, it's a Michigan thing, of one of her relatives. I'd never been there before, had never met these aunts, uncles and cousins. There was a badminton net set up on the property, and since Donna and I had recently had a badminton unit in gym class, we went into the storage unit/pole barn to search out the rackets and shuttlecocks. At one point while she was digging through stacks of stuff, she commented something like, "I think, cousin, Karen's husband is kinda creepy." The thing was, I looked directly at Donna and spoke that line completely in unison with her. I'd had a very sudden flash, as if I'd been in this exact place and this situation before, and I knew what she was going to say as soon as she paused and looked up at me. Donna, of course, was stunned and asked me how I knew she was going to say that. "Déjà vu," I replied, still trying to understand it myself. She was unfamiliar with the term other than the literal translation. "Already seen?" she asked. I tried to explain that I didn't know if I'd seen this scenario in a dream or what, but she was weirded out by it, as was I. In high school, AOL was new and chat rooms were super popular. I was 16 when we finally got the first PC and AOL and the whole works. Creepy old men would lurk in generally teenage-run chat rooms because creepy old men. Some guy started messaging me, he was in his late 30s, but it was the internet, who knows if he really was. He could have been 78 for all anyone knew. I was a teenage girl, why would I be interested? So I told him to not talk to me. He then made a fake account claiming he was a teenage boy, but then he started talking like he did before and I caught on. Why so much effort to talk to a plain 16-year-old? I filed complaints, but only so much can happen when he hasn't really done anything illegal. Whatever. So one day, my parents are out and my brother is gone. The home phone rings and it's him. He tells me he knows I'm alone, my parents are out, he knows what my house looks like, he describes it over the phone. He tells me he could easily come to me if I asked him. I told him I'm not amused and to just stop. He disappeared after. No idea. It was just weird. Still no clue. Edit, well, crap, I had no idea this would gain any type of attention, let alone this many comments. I sincerely have no idea what happened. Maybe he was an expert mindfucker and he was experimenting with how to really mess with someone. It worked, though. I have really no idea who he was or where he lived, since the internet was new and the accessibility to find information wasn't what it is today. He could have been a teacher, a 67-year-old man, a strung-out whack job down the street, a truck driver, who knows. I just find it unbelievable that he disappeared and that he tried so hard to creep on a teenage girl. Ew. This will get buried, but oh well. Back in 2008, I lived near my college in an apartment. My apartment was set back from the main road quite a bit and was in a wooded and hilly area. One night, I was out running near sundown. I'm at the bottom of a hill that's behind my apartment, so it was near the end of my run. I look up ahead at the top of the hill and notice 3 guys on bikes just sitting there. Being a 20-year-old female, my spidey senses start tingling. I tell myself I'm psyching myself out and it'll be fine, so I keep running. I'm about halfway up the hill. The 3 guys are still just sitting there, facing my direction. I don't have a phone or anything and nowhere else to go, so I tell myself I'll just run as hard as I can and scream if I need to. Suddenly, I hear something coming up beside me. I look to my right and see a German Shepherd. He's running alongside me. I've never seen this dog before in my life. I can't explain it, but I just knew I'd be okay now. I continued running up the hill with this random dog beside me. When we're approaching the guys, this dog gets slightly ahead of me and runs directly in front of me instead of to my right. He gets to the guys and stops dead in his tracks. I continue running and pass the guys without even making eye contact. Once I'm past the guys, the dog catches back up to me and continues running alongside me. He stays with me until I take the turn into my apartment's very well lit parking lot. He disappears into the trees as quickly as he appeared. I took that route at the same exact time every single day after that for weeks and would drive down that road often, hoping to come across him again. No luck. I never saw him again. My friends are all convinced he was a guardian angel making sure I stayed safe. I'm not really a believer, so IDK, but it's the most creepy, bizarre, and awesome thing to ever happen to me. When I was about 10 years old, I had a pretty scary dream. In this dream, my mom drowned in quicksand and my little brother, 7 or 8 at the time, jumped in to save her. In the process, he broke his arm. The next day, my little brother broke his arm. No quicksand involved and my mom was never in danger, but still, I was super freaked out by the fact that I had dreamt about my little brother's injury literally the night before. To this day, when I think about it, it gives me chills. Edit, spelling mistake. I woke up for some reason and I heard the hammer of a gun being pulled back in front of my face. I could hear the metal on metal and the creaking and the clicks. I opened my eyes thinking I was about to die and nothing was there. The previous owner of the house had overdosed in the living room and used to deal guns. We found some in the attic. I apologize for grammar of spelling mistakes. There was a kid in another class at my school in 6th grade that was genius. I don't mean like, oh he's really smart cause doesn't need to do the homework and still gets a 100s. Like he's was doing advanced calculus with a local college professor after school. This kid was smarter than everyone. So one day our computer system for the entire school goes down. I was in a poorer area at the time, so this was normal. This was occurred many times, so normally it would affect us cause we barely used laptops and such. The only class that was affected was the computer class. This kid was in the computer class. 3 or so hours later when I'm class with him during social studies. 3 guys with FBI jackets on and our local chief escorted him out of the building. We were told nothing, the parents were told nothing. It never hit the news. To this day we have no clue what he did. Except every single teacher I've asked about this says they were also told nothing. I haven't seen the kid since and I can't find a trace of him going to any other school or ending up in trouble. He just fell off the face of the earth with his parents. Yeah, I forgot to mention that parents also disappeared and no one really looked for them after a month or so. I still think about that kid. When I was in high school, I would always be the first to arrive home out of my family, having the entire house to myself. I've never been superstitious or someone who scared easily, and the hour I had alone was my favorite time of the entire day. My bedroom is upstairs, and one day when I got home from school I placed my bag away and started up the stairs. About halfway I stopped because I thought I heard something coming from upstairs, so I stayed and listened. I heard a very slow rendition of the melody from Ring Around the Rosie, crystal clear, coming from my bedroom. I was 100% sure I was the only one home, and I had absolutely no device that could be playing music unprompted, especially Ring Around the Rosie. I froze in fear and listened for about 15 seconds to make sure I was really hearing it, which I was. I just turned back down the steps and waited around in the living room for my family to get home before I went back upstairs. I went in my room a few hours later and there was nothing out of the ordinary. I know it's not a very climatic story, but it's something I think about every now and then. I never told anyone about it because, why would I, but that was the first time something truly strange happened to me. A few years ago, I took my dog out for a walk at night. The apartment complex I lived in at the time had enough light outside, so I was never scared of going out for a little walk. One night, as I walked down the stairs, I noticed a large brown furry thing under the stairs. I know for a fact there was 3 thin bushes under those stairs, but that night, whatever that thing was in between those bushes. I was too afraid to inspect it, so I walked the dog around the neighborhood for 5 minutes. When I got back, the large brown thing was gone. I stood there for a second before gathering up the courage to go up the stairs. My dog, however, refused to go up. I scooped him up and ran up the stairs into the comfort of my own home. A few days later I sat in the living room minding my own business. From the corner of my eye, I saw something brown and furry crawl from the ceiling into my room. That night, I had a dream I was being attacked by an unknown creature. I covered myself in my blanket and it scratched and tore at it, yelling obscenities at me. I got angry and launched myself at it, punching and scratching at a large brown furry creature. When I woke up, my dog was there watching me and whining. I'd quit to even think this was. Edit. Wow, I honestly expected this comment to get buried. Thanks to all of your input. I actually spoke to my mom about this. And what she said scares me even more. She has seen it crawl into rooms. But like me, chalked it up to her hair in her eye or something. However, she told me she also dreamt of it. In her dream, she was paralyzed, it was running around her and taunting her. She tried so hard to start praying, but the words wouldn't come out. It got close to her face, she stared deeply into its demonic red eyes. She felt its fur touch her skin. When she broke out of her dream, my dog was staring at her, very close to her face. My dog almost got punched. Lamau, my mom's defense when she gets scared. So yeah. I guess we did see something in that apartment. Whatever it is, I'm glad we moved out and it didn't follow us. A couple of things happened to me and my housemate when we moved into the top apartment in an old building in Europe, right next to a forest known for witchcraft. The locals even have a witches' parade every year. It's a harmless bit of fun. The apartment was huge, 3 bathrooms, 2 bedrooms, a study, 2 living rooms, a living space, a kitchen, 2 balconies. The bigger one was upstairs, across from a door to the attic, that ran across the entire house. It was dark and full of a lot of old stuff, like from a century ago. We found porcelain, really old wooden furniture, and a doll neither of us wanted to touch. There were also some children's slippers and black and white pictures of a child from when the town still had carts pulled by oxen. It was a wonderful place to live, and the cheap rent made it wonderfuler, but both of us were mildly creeped out in the beginning. We used to hear stuff while in our rooms, like banging or footsteps, or like something had fallen on the carpets. My housemate would text me, "Did you hear that too?" But she soon stopped. She never wanted to talk about it either. I guess she didn't want to give it any power by acknowledging it. I clearly remember the first time she was out. It was winter, so it got dark by 4 p.m. I needed to grab groceries, so I left all the lights on to make myself feel better. I tried to look for my earphones for some music along the way, but I couldn't find them and I left without them. When I returned, every single light in the house was switched off, except the one in my room, and I went to my room. My earphones were lying neatly rolled on the top of my bed. A few other incidents took place while we lived there too, like the bulbs in the corridor, and only the corridor, dying with loud pops one by one, my housemate hearing something like a dog scratching at her door and texting me to let her sleep one evening while I was over at a friend's place, me hearing a door loudly banging somewhere in the house while I was on the toilet, and the banging stopping immediately as soon as I flushed. It was like it didn't realize there was someone home. The house was weirdly cold too, but we lived there for a year without anything major happening. I was somewhere around 17 years old and a guy started jerking off next to me on the highway and just kept following me and slowing down next to me and continuing to do it. I was just thinking about it the other day for some reason. It was by definition creepy. When I was about 8 years old, my kitten Peter Chris, named after the Kiss band member because she was a great Abby, got hit and killed by a car. I was devastated. I had rescued her with my older sister from a box in the rain. It was a miracle our parents let us keep her and her brother, Nigel. One day after school, my mother tells me that there had been a freak accident and that my kitten had died. I found out a few years later that she had been hit. Anyway, later that night, I was laying in bed and I felt her kneading, or making biscuits as some may call it, on my legs. I looked back behind me, as I was laying on my stomach, only to see not a thing there. I laid back down and the feeling came back again. Every time I would look behind me, it stopped. To this day, I still believe it was her. TL, doctor, kitten got killed by car, felt her ghost making biscuits on my legs. I've shared this before, but it still confuses the hell out of my family. Edit: this happened last year. I copy and pasted it from my original post. The beginning of the story says last night, but this was almost a year ago. We moved out of that house about 6 months after this happened. My husband recently took an overnight job to help us out during COVID. He's only been there about 2 weeks and works evenings/overnights, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Last night was no different. He left home around 8:15 p.m. Our daughter, age 11, and I decided to make it a movie night. Around 11 p.m., I heard keys in my back door and the usual sounds my husband makes when he comes home. I creep out to the kitchen to make sure it was him, and it was. He told me he needed to grab his knee compression sleeve, walks down the hall, says hi to our daughter as he passes the living room, and goes upstairs. He came back down, gave me a kiss and left again. We finished our movie and went to bed. In the morning when he got home, I made a joking comment about him forgetting his knee sleeve. He was genuinely confused as I recalled the previous night. Our daughter confirmed everything I said and he still was acting confused. I pulled up our security motion camera on my phone to show him when he popped in quick. But there was no footage from the night before, or any other night, of him coming home after he's left for work. My daughter and I both heard him, saw him, and I touched him. But he was never home during that time. Nothing else out of the ordinary happened that night. We seriously have no idea what happened. Edit: to clarify, there is footage of that night, but it doesn't show him coming home at that time. The camera was on the back porch, not inside the house. We had 2 carbon monoxide detectors, one on each floor of the house. We moved out a few months later for unrelated reasons. Driving from Northern California to Southern California through the middle of the night about a decade ago. I was tired, and the scenery along the freeway through the Central Valley isn't very interesting. I remember passing an old silo, looking at my car clock and it was 3:17 in the morning. Drove some more, past a power line, and it was 3:21. I blinked, shuffled in my seat, and passed that same old silo, and it was back to 3:17. I was in disbelief. I just stared at my clock for a few moments. Drove a little bit more, past the same power line, 3:21. Don't know why or how, but I went backwards about 4 minutes. Never experienced anything similar or since. I, F27, was training to be a nurse. Here in Germany you have to visit and practice at a lot of places. I was working at a hospice, a place where the terminal ill patients can stay until their last day. I was there for 8 weeks and was in my last year of studying. I was doing around, checking on everyone, making sure they are not in pain, need any help or just a talk. One patient, a woman who was there for days, had a different breathing and I called her husband who was in the group room. Don't know how to exactly describe it. She had her finals breaths, while her husband was holding her hand. It was peaceful and I know she was gone. At this moment another patient made a call. We had phones, which would ring if someone requested a nurse. I excused myself and left her room. Deep breath and going to the patient who was calling. I entered and smiled. "How can I help you?" The man told me his guest would like to know where the exit was. I was a little confused, because he hadn't any visitors that day yet, so I asked, "Who do you mean? Maybe I just didn't see anyone, because I was for half an hour with the dying patient." And he answered, "Well, this lady here. She wants to know where she could get out." I went pale, blood falling into my knees. I was shocked. I stuttered while opening the window. Here is the way to the balcony and right to left, down the stairs is the door. I'll get you some water." Left the room, and was hardly breathing, leaning against the wall. Was standing there for 5 minutes. One of the nurses saw me and asked if I was okay. So I told her what just happened. All she did was to smile and say, "Yes, that kind of stuff happens a lot here." A few hours later I asked the man if her guest found the way out. Him, yes, she did, and said thank you for everything. Had to process that for days, weeks, months. I still can't believe it. But I am sure since then, that we carry a soul. Also some nasty ghostly other things happened to me and my colleagues, while working in an ICU. Worked as a tour guide in an old 18th century mansion, and lots of unexplained things would happen quite regularly. This one time while I was with some guests in the former ballroom, a little boy asked his mother, "Mommy, why are there children crying upstairs?" Of course nobody else could hear it, but above us would have been the old nursery where 2 young girls died in the 19th century. Nursery was on the 3rd floor and the entire level just had a very strange vibe to it. Still gives me the creeps thinking about it. I fell asleep on the couch and got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Once I got there I realized I didn't have to go. I headed towards the bedroom but decided to turn around and go back downstairs to the couch. When I got there I saw my body still asleep, curled up on the sofa. I don't remember what happened after, and I know it had to have just been a dream. But, it still freaks me out to this day to think about it. When I was in 2nd grade I was getting the mail, and when I picked out a letter for me I got a flash of this lady who I had never seen before, and I was like, okay, whatever. Turned out it was an image of my 2nd grade teacher before I even met her on the first day of school, wearing the exact clothes I pictured. The letter was a welcome to class letter from her. This didn't happen to me but to my mom. We used to live in this one house that the past 2 owners killed themselves in. One of them hung themselves in the basement, you know, the scariest part of the house. While living there doors would slam shut by themselves and other creepy things would happen, but this one time my mother was going downstairs to do laundry. She always had a creepy feeling being in the basement, like someone was watching her, so she always wanted my dad to go down too, but he was at work, me and my siblings were at school, and she was home alone. Laundry needed done badly, so she just went down by herself. But on her venture down the steps she saw a man with a goat head running at her. She refused to go down there alone for a long time till my dad gutted the basement and sorta kinda demanded the ghost/demon to leave the house. She still hates being in basements alone even after we moved.